These lines are some of the largest drawings ever made by humans. They stretch across the Nazca Desert for miles, carved directly into the earth. Animals, geometric shapes, perfectly straight lines that run farther than the eye can follow. But here's the detail most people miss. If you stand on the ground, you see nothing meaningful. The figures collapse into broken paths. The animals lose their shape. The design disappears. These artworks only make sense from far above the desert floor. No hills existed, no towers were built, no technology allowed flight. So this creates a terrifying contradiction. The Nazca people invested enormous effort into something they could barely see, which forces a dangerous question. If the creators weren't the audience, then who was? Archaeologists often explain the Nazca Lines as ritual pathways. They say people walked along the lines during ceremonies. But that explanation collapses under one simple problem. Rituals depend on visibility. Symbols need to be seen to have meaning. From the ground, the Nazca Lines don't form animals. They don't form symbols. They don't form anything recognizable. A hummingbird becomes random scratches. A monkey turns into disconnected curves. If these were meant for human participants, then the audience never saw the message. That's not symbolic design. That's failed communication. And before we go deeper into this contradiction, please subscribe to our YouTube channel because no one else can give you research-driven videos like ours. Because the next layer of evidence shows this wasn't a misunderstanding. The mismatch between creator and viewer may have been intentional. Some of the Nazca Lines are longer than modern highways. They stretch for kilometers in perfectly straight paths. Keeping a straight line that long is difficult, even with modern surveying tools. Yet the Nazca achieved this using simple wooden stakes and rope. That explanation sounds comforting, but it ignores the real problem. Planning something this large requires a full overhead view. You don't just draw and hope it works. You verify proportions, you check angles, you correct errors, but there are no corrections. The animal figures are drawn in single continuous strokes, no overlaps, no abandoned lines. One wrong curve would destroy the entire image, yet every figure is clean. Intentional, final. This wasn't trial and error. It was execution based on confidence in the final result, confidence that only makes sense. If the designer already knew what the image would look like from a viewpoint they themselves didn't have. To see the Nazca Lines clearly, you need to be hundreds of feet in the air, not slightly elevated, not standing on a hill, fully above the desert. But in Nazca times, there were no mountains overlooking the plains, no tall structures built nearby. Archaeologists searched for platforms. They found none. Some suggest ladders or scaffolding, but scaffolding leaves traces, post holes, foundations, nothing exists. Hot air balloons are often mentioned, but this idea collapses too. No fabric remains, no heat-resistant materials, no recorded tradition. So we're left with an uncomfortable reality. The Nazca created images that demanded an aerial audience in a world where humans could not reach the sky. That's not a technological gap. That's an audience mismatch built directly into the design. If the Nazca Lines were just art, they would focus on beauty, symmetry, decoration visible to people nearby. But that's not what we see. Many lines point toward water sources hidden beneath the desert surface. Some align with solstices and seasonal changes. Others connect figures across vast distances as if they're part of a larger system. This isn't expressive art. This is functional design. Functional designs solve problems. They communicate information, and information only matters to someone who can read it. Maps aren't made for admiration. They're made for navigation. So why create a map that the mapmaker can't see? Unless the map wasn't for them. Unless the Nazca weren't the users, but the builders. Which raises a chilling possibility. The real audience was always somewhere else. From the air, the Nazca Lines transform completely. The animals become recognizable. The geometry locks into place. The straight lines suddenly make sense. This isn't coincidence. The entire system activates only when viewed from above. Some researchers suggest the sky itself was the intended audience, gods, spirits, celestial beings. But even that explanation has a flaw. Religious symbols usually exaggerate. They repeat motifs, they evolve over time. The Nazca Lines don't. The style stays consistent across centuries. The proportions don't drift. The execution doesn't decay. That suggests strict rules, standards. Almost like the creators were following instructions, not expressing belief. Instructions: assume a recipient, someone who needed these images to be exact, someone who viewed them from a place humans couldn't reach. When humans create art, mistakes happen, styles evolve, signatures appear, but the Nazca Lines show none of that. There are no personal variations, no experimental figures, no abandoned designs. Everything follows a consistent logic. That suggests the Nazca people weren't inventing these images. They were executing them. Builders follow plans. Designers create them. And the Nazca behaved like builders. They cleared stones. They maintained lines for centuries. They repaired damaged sections. Maintenance only matters if the image must remain readable. Readable to whom? Not to the people maintaining it. This starts to resemble a labor system serving an external viewer, one that demanded precision, visibility, and long-term preservation. Which leads to a disturbing idea. The Nazca Lines may not represent worship. They may represent compliance. The Nazca Lines weren't meant to be temporary. They weren't drawn once and forgotten. They were preserved, re-cleared, maintained for generations. When wind covered the lines, the Nazca removed stones again. When paths faded, they restored them. That's not ritual behavior. Rituals end, festivals pass, belief systems change, but the Nazca Lines stayed consistent for over 1,000 years. That kind of long-term maintenance only makes sense if visibility mattered continuously. Not once a year, not during ceremonies, always. As if the audience could return at any time. As if the message had to remain readable whenever the viewer looked down. That implies scheduling, expectation. Almost like the creators believed someone was watching. Not symbolically, but literally. And that belief shaped how long the message had to survive. The Nazca Lines don't show daily life. No houses, no people, no battles. Instead, we see animals, birds, insects, abstract geometry. And the selection is strange. Some animals aren't local. Some are microscopic in importance to human survival. So why choose them? One explanation stands out. These figures are easily identifiable from extreme distance. Simple silhouettes, high contrast shapes, recognizable outlines, exactly what you would design if the viewer was far away and moving. The Nazca didn't choose complexity. They chose clarity. That's not symbolic thinking. That's visual engineering. Which means the figures weren't meant to be interpreted emotionally. They were meant to be recognized instantly by an audience that wouldn't slow down to admire details. Every explanation struggles with one fact. The Nazca Lines only work when viewed from above, not partially, not symbolically, completely. They demand an audience that the builders themselves could never join. If they were rituals, the participants were blind. If they were art, the artists never saw the final piece. If they were maps, the map makers couldn't read them. That leaves one conclusion. The Nazca weren't communicating with themselves. They were sending a message outward, upward, to something that could see what humans could not. And the most disturbing part isn't who that audience might have been. It's this question: why were the Nazca so certain that someone was watching?